Okay, now I'm very excited to have my good friend Mark Bilicki here. I've known Mark, well, it's got to be 10 years.
Yeah, at least
by now. I got the benefit of having a news story for him here to introduce him. But Mark has probably taught. Your website says over 10,000.
20. It's over 20.
Okay. So now we're at 20,000 CWP holders in South Carolina. SLED often uses him as a reference. If I got it right, I think SLED used his syllabus for all the CWP teachers. He's constantly in the news. I'm kind of jealous because anybody wants to know anything about the law, they call him. They don't bother calling me. So anyway, here's a little news story I found on him. This was a cool job segment in the news not too long ago, I think.
Seen on 7, you're in the law. You never know where we're going to take you on Tuesdays. That's because it's cool jobs time. You know, where we show you the most awesome gigs in the Carolinas. This week, Seen on 7's Jamarcus Gaston is packing heat.
That's right, Kimberly. We're here at Allen Arms in Greenville to take aim at a cool job. Take a look. Guns drawn and bullets firing.
Yes.
The indoor range at Allen Arms in Greenville can be intimidating.
And it's my job to take away that fear. That's all we do.
Instructor Mark Bilicki's job,
CWP instructor, hunter's ed instructor, I do boater's ed.
is to help shoot down those fears using his extreme knowledge.
It is the highest certification that one can get through the NRA.
To educate,
You pick up any gun.
traveling the country, teaching over 50 classes for the National Rifle Association.
He taught every branch of the domestic military, including the Homeland Security and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as militaries from 17 foreign different countries.
And of course, his many classes here at Allen Arms.
Reloading, personal protection.
Firearms run in the family for Mark, but this wasn't his original career.
Only 12 years ago, I was a corporate airplane pilot. Through a routine flight physical, they discovered bone marrow cancer, and that stopped my flying career, so I had to find something else to do. So my wife finally said, why don't you do something that you always enjoyed? So
His home at the shooting range. He even coached me through my first shots, assisted by owner Frank Allen.
Very good. There you go.
Aiming to be safe, calm, cool, and of course to have fun.
You hit it. Look at that.
Mission accomplished when you were learning from the best.
When you're teaching a student who's either unaware of how to handle a gun safely or scared of it, when they actually get it, and you'll see the light switch flick on, and they start handling the gun safely and things like that, there's a tremendous feeling of accomplishment.
All right, thank you, Jamarcus. And tell you what I'll do. I'll post my target shoot from Allen Arms on my Facebook tonight. You can check that out. Not a bad shot. To find out more about Allen Arms or to suggest Jamarcus's next cool jobs adventure, simply go to SeenOn7.com. Also keep a close eye on SeenOn7.com. In the next couple of days, Jamarcus will be launching a behind-the-scenes blog where you'll get more videos, information, and even stuff from his shoots there.
Okay, perfect. All right, Mark.
How do we turn these on?
They should be on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks again, Steve, for inviting me. Like Steve said, I'm actually a master training counselor with the NRA. I have what's equivalent to a doctorate degree in firearms education through the NRA, and currently there's fewer than 50 of us in the world. So they send me around the world teaching firearms instruction to anyone who will listen. In fact, last week I was down at Fort Jackson, and right between Christmas and New Year's I was at Camp Lejeune doing some stuff down there for them. So firearm instructions, like I say, all I do. My wife is actually a manager. She actually runs at what used to be Allen Arms Indoor Range. I don't think Steve knows this, but it actually got sold last week. It's now called City Arsenal. So she's still running the place, and she's busier than ever, so it's rare that I see her. Also, my youngest son, I have 4 boys, my youngest son Bradley is a 6-time South Carolina state champion, 3-time world champion. He has 15 medals in world competition, 9 are gold. He's sponsored by Remington as a professional shooter since age 13. And he actually tried out and made the U.S. Olympic team at age 16. And at age 18, he decided that it wasn't for him. And he would have shot in England in 2010, but in 2008, he decided that this just wasn't for him, and he walked away from it. He's currently about to enroll in the U.S. Army and go fly helicopters. So yeah, it's pretty cool. My daughter-in-law just made captain in the U.S. Army too, so I saw that last week as well. So a little footnote I wanted to expand on. The previous speaker was speaking about suppressors. I just want to expand on that for those you don't know. A suppressor does not completely silence the shot. And the reason for that is there's actually two noises that a shooter hears simultaneously. So as a shooter, you hear one noise, but there are actually two that are actually being are attempted to be muffled. The first is the report of the expanding gases, and the second is the bullet actually breaking the sound barrier. If you were to go safely 300 yards away from a shot and go behind a berm and listen, you'd hear a bang, crack, bang, crack. You would hear two distinct noises, but you as a shooter only hear one. So what a suppressor does is it muffles the report of the expanding gases. You'll still get a supersonic crack, unless you go subsonic. When you go subsonic, like for instance, the only round that's inherently subsonic as far as handgun goes would be a .45 ACP. If you wanted to go with another caliber, you would actually have to download it to get it to that level. So suppressors greatly reduce the noise, but they don't stop it. Okay, just so you know. And again, I own many of those. Yeah.
I'm a hunter.
Okay.
A little bit of hearing loss in my right ear from shooting in the field.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's getting more significant over here. So I've been really interested in the suppressor. If you go subsonic, you're using a rifle, 7mm or something like that. Is it possible to take a large caliber rifle to subsonic, or you've got to shoot a low caliber rifle? And even if so, it's going to be effective.
Well, the 300 blackout is a good example. I mean, up to about 100, 120 yards, you can still take a deer effectively with it. Beyond that, I think it would be a stretch for the round that you're actually trying to do. So some of the larger calibers, 270, 30-06, or what have you, it would suppress the expanding gas. You might benefit from your hearing, but again, it still gives a report of where the round actually goes. So
it would be effective reducing the sound.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, with that said, we have subsonic 22 ammunition, and I own several suppressors. We have some that are completely silent. I mean, you cannot hear them go off at all. In fact, the BB gun makes more noise than they do. So, and again, I hope they get rid of the tax. I don't like it either. So, yeah.
How effective is subsonic 22 ammo? I mean, is 25% effective as a regular 22 round?
As a regular 22 round, probably not, because the 22 actually goes out of the barrel. The standard 22 velocity is about 1,050 feet a second, which is right on the borderline of supersonic. So some rounds out of a box of 50, half of them may actually get a supersonic crack, where the other half may not, and you'll hear the noise. You'll actually hear the distinctive. So in subsonic, it's usually below 1,000 feet a second, usually around 950. So if you can get 950 or below, you're completely within that subsonic. And again, supersonic is relative to atmospheric conditions, altitude, air density. There's all sorts of things that factor into that too. So just to say that you have a round, it could be subsonic here and not somewhere else. That's another issue. So yeah, some of my worthless knowledge. Yeah, no problem, no problem. I just wanted to expand on that because there is a lot of mystery on suppressors, and a lot of people just don't realize. They go, that wasn't quiet. It's not, you know. But no, there are things you can do to even make them quieter. For instance, my .45 ACP, I can actually put water down the suppressor, just drain the water out, and for the first 3 shots, it's completely quiet. After that, the noise starts coming back in. So there are things that you can do, but again, suppressors don't completely eliminate noise. They just greatly reduce it.
Not James Bond.
Yeah, not James Bond. Yeah, it's only on TV that you see that, and we're fighting the media all the time. Okay, one of the things that I was asked to do today is give you a little insight as to what CWP instructors actually teach their students, so that if you get a case where you have to defend somebody that's actually used a gun in self-defense, you'll be more apt to know what we actually teach in class. So, you know, obviously there's a great deal of topics that the SLED requires that we actually teach. Gun handling, gun safety, marksmanship fundamentals, that's part of the class. Of course, legal, carry limitations, and those kind of things. Now, SLED mandates a certain set of criteria that we are required to teach. And we have to submit a syllabus that is so in-depth and so detailed that if we were injured on the way to class, someone from SLED could pick it up and teach it unassisted. Now, this is my syllabus. It's bigger, I think, than the 3-ring binder that you guys have. Now, this actually is a syllabus that I actually wrote, and we use this in class on a regular basis. And again, SLED is considering using this as part of the mandated curriculum that they use. However, I have seen instructors that had 6 sheets of paper, and that's what they teach off of. So you should know that right up front. There's about 1,200 instructors here in the state of South Carolina. And I'm not going to tell you the guy's name, but there was an agent at SLED who had a conversation with me at a gun show. It was probably 2 years ago. And he came up to me and said, "Mark, do you know what my problem is?" I said, "You only have one?" And he thought that was funny. And I said, he said, "I've got about 1,000 instructors in the state of South Carolina. There's about 100 of them that are doing an amazing job. They teach everything that the state requires. They're above and beyond. In fact, I wouldn't hesitate to send my wife or daughter to them and know that they got exactly what they paid for." He said, "In fact, you're at the top of that very short list." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Then we have about 200 instructors who are working on their craft. We cut them a little slack. They make some mistakes. Our investment is that we hope that they turn into somebody like you." And I said, "Well, okay. The other 700 should be in prison." That's what he said. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you're going to see people who teach this class who are very strong on legal and some who are not. And you're going to have to defend whoever that was. So one of the things that we do is we have to submit a copy of our syllabus. So if you're ever having to defend somebody, the instructor that actually taught them had filed a syllabus with the state, and you can subpoena those for evidence. We've done that in other court cases as well. So that's going to dictate what they're required to teach. Now, SLED reviews that to make sure it meets the criteria of SLED. The other stuff that we put in is called filler. Now, the state mandated several years ago that our course be no less than 8 hours in duration. Now, I would argue that that does not include lunch or breaks. That puts us up to about a 10-hour day. Now, recently, they've done away with that requirement. There is no longer a mandatory 8-hour requirement. But they also didn't take any of this away. So anybody that's teaching a course in 5-6 hours, they have issues. And part of the way that when I train new instructors, I tell them this. It's just probably one of the biggest tasks that you're ever going to take on, because we have to get a civilian ready to take another human life and hold up to the scrutiny of a court case. Now, I often tell everybody, when you join the military, you sign your name on a line. As soon as you put the pen down, they hand a gun in your hands and say, "Go out there, you'll figure it out," right? No, that's not what happens. They go through 3 months of basic training, then they go through their MOS training, which could be up to a couple of years before they actually see action. When a police officer gets hired by Greenville County, they don't, as soon as he signs his name on the line, they don't give him hand him a set of keys to a cruiser and say, "Go out there, ride around, and figure it out." They go through months of intensive training. I have 8 hours to get you ready to do what they do. 8 hours. It's a dang near impossible task. Now, I don't shorten my class for anybody. In fact, there's a limitation that just got lifted by Nikki Haley a couple years ago that says that former military is no longer required to take what we call the gun handling part of the class. So they don't have to go through the safety, they don't have to do the gun handling. In fact, the written exam is now broken into 2 separate segments. There's 25 questions on legal and 25 questions on gun handling. Now, I field calls all the time where people call and say, "I understand I'm not required to take the entire training." I said, "You are correct." On February 12th of 2014, Nikki Haley signed a law that went into effect immediately. And it does not require you to take the entire course. With that said, I'm not your instructor. You either take my entire course or go find somebody else. And they ask me why. You know, I've done my service with the military. I said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Can you be too rich?" No. Then you can't be too safe either. A lot of times what the military teaches is different than what we teach in civilian. And it is dramatically different. In fact, the instruction that I give at Camp Lejeune or Fort Benning or wherever I'm at is completely different than what I teach civilians, because it's a different way of life. And there are different things that we actually do. So I tell people that if you want to take my course as a retired military, I encourage you to do it, but you're going to sit through the entire course. I have not had a single person that's taken me up on the offer to come back and said that was worthless time. I heard things that I never knew, and that's kind of what we do. So what I want to do today is cover the part of the law that some of you just need to know, that we cover about 20 different laws in the CWP syllabus. There are others, but these are the ones that are relevant to SLED. Now, rather than speak in legal terms, we try to break it down, and I use a lot of analogies in class. For instance, one of the first conversations that we have is the best way to survive any confrontation is to avoid it. There is no dishonor in running like a screaming schoolgirl from a violent confrontation. Do you know why? And they look at me and say, why? And I said, because tomorrow you will wake up next to your family members. How you make that appointment really doesn't matter, does it? Just as long as you're there. So the best way to survive any confrontation is to avoid it. Okay? I often tell them that carrying a gun or having a gun for concealment does not give you the ability to walk into a place that you wouldn't have gone without it. It should give you the wisdom to stay away from it to begin with. And that's ultimately what we do. So I would never go in a place where I wouldn't go without it. And I encourage my students not to do the same thing. Number 2 says, a CWP holder is responsible for everything that his or her bullet strikes, damages, injures, or kills. Now, we cover this topic throughout the day. We even cover a section on ammunition where we talk about identification, malfunction, proper storage, and those kind of things. And in that segment, I talk about, do you know how far a bullet will travel? And they go, no. Well, there's a document case in history, and I'm not willing to argue the details, of a rifle round traveling a little more than 5.5 miles. 5.5 miles. A handgun round, a mile is certainly relevant, don't you think? And they say, yeah. And I said, well, do you know where a mile is from here? And I pick an object or a location of an intersection. From the classroom, I see, can you see who's walking through that intersection from right now, from your seat right now? And they say, no. Well, you are responsible for that bullet, regardless of what it hits, from the day you purchase it to the time it comes to rest and whatever damage it does in between. So you really have to know what you're doing. And they're kind of shocked by that statement. You just don't get to launch rounds and say, I didn't mean to do it. And that's a huge issue. Now, one of the things that I deal with in the concealed carry permit too is the what if question. Well, what if, well, what if, well, what if? I got to tell you, I hate that question. Because in your mind, you see a vivid set of details taking place, and often you don't effectively convey the details of that confrontation to me, which may force me to give you wrong information. So I don't like the what if question. If you ask me a what if question in CWP class, you're going to hear me answer, well, here's what I would do. Of course, one of the ways that we nip this in the bud before we even get those questions is to talk about the 3 criteria needed to be present for you to be able to use a gun. They are ability, opportunity, and jeopardy. Ability, your assailant must have a weapon or what you perceive to be a weapon. Number 2 is opportunity. They got to be close enough to use the weapon that you think they have. And number 3 is jeopardy. You actually have to feel that your life's in danger, that if you don't stop this, you will die, come very close to it, or somebody around you. It's that easy. So when they say, listen, I saw a guy stealing an extension ladder out of my tool shed, I couldn't shoot him. Ability, opportunity, and jeopardy. Does he have a weapon? Is he close enough to use it? Do you feel your life's in jeopardy? No. Well, congratulations, you just committed murder. So it's really easy. A lot of times, if we get them to think in that realm, they can answer their own questions before they even ask them. Of course, one of the other things that we do too is we ask them, you know, we try to define what's truly valuable in life, and we do a hypothetical thing. Now, by this time this topic comes up, I usually have gotten to know the people a little bit, and I've heard, you know, conversations on breaks and things like that. So I've already targeted an individual, usually a young lady, sometimes a young gentleman. And I'll ask them, I said, let's do this. Let's pick a person in the audience and say, we're going to construct an aquarium. This aquarium is going to be 60 feet in diameter. Now, it's 20 feet deep, and there's an 18-inch walkway that runs right across the middle of it. There are no railings. And I'm going to ask you to stand in the center of that. So there's 30 feet in any direction. Now, swimming below you are 3 10-foot great white sharks that haven't eaten in 6 months. What would have to happen to think it's a good idea for you to jump in that water? And they look at me without hesitation, say nothing. And that's not true. Would you jump in to save your daughter? Yes. Then use a gun to defend her. Would you jump in to save your wife? I would push mine, but would you jump in to save yours? And they say yes. Well, then use a gun to defend her. Would you jump in to retrieve your wallet? No. Then don't use a gun to defend it. It's what we call the Shark Tank theory, and it completely defines what's truly valuable in this life, and it's human life. So when we couple that with the ability, opportunity, and jeopardy, they begin to think in a different realm. And that's kind of what we're looking for. We want to affect change in the way that they actually think. I've had people leave out of the CWP class and say, I'm actually scared to use a gun. Good, then I did my job. You shouldn't be afraid to use it. You should know when to use it and when not to, more importantly. Number 3 says, it is the CWP holder's responsibility to understand and maintain a working knowledge of SC statutory case law related to handguns and the use of deadly force. Well, that's kind of great to say, but hard to do, isn't it? We don't require additional training. So why would somebody seek out that knowledge? Why would somebody go out and look at another CWP class 5, 6, 7, 10 years after they took their initial training if it's not required by law? Well, here's what I tell them. The average cost to defend yourself in a shooting is about $750,000. It's probably a lot better to take a $75 class and know what the laws are than you try to plead ignorance. Because ignorance of the law is no excuse. You still committed a crime. So therefore, you might want to do it. How often? I tell them about once every 2 years is not a bad idea. In fact, we make available for the students to take a class free of charge. We call it a legal refresher course. We usually do it on a Friday night from 5 to about 9 o'clock. And we don't talk about this is a gun, these are its parts, this is how it works. We talk about the laws as of 3:30 that afternoon. So it's a great opportunity. Sometimes I play to a standing room only. Other times I cancel the class because nobody showed up, which perplexes me. I don't understand why you wouldn't do it. So it's kind of interesting. Number 4 says a concealed weapon permit holder will have his or her CWP identification card in his or her possession whenever he or she is carrying a concealed weapon. So I often tell them, does your gun work without bullets? Yeah, well, your concealed carry gun doesn't work without your permit. And then we have this argument. SLED has 90 days to submit to approve an application once it's submitted. Now, I'm going to ask you to give me 100 days to get your permit back to you. Well, why is there a discrepancy? Well, today's Saturday, right? I can't mail your permit today. Tomorrow's Sunday. Let's say that it leaves out of here by Tuesday by the time I do everything I need to do. If it takes 2 days to get to Columbia, that's Tuesday, Wednesday. 2 days back, that's Thursday, Friday. We just added a week to your CWP. So I tell them, don't call me before 100 days. Don't call me before 100 days. And are you going to leave here with your permit today? No. Then you can't carry a gun either until you actually receive it in the mail. So they kind of get that. Now, here's the other argument. Let's say that you're here with a spouse or a loved one and they get theirs in 30 days. Don't call me looking for yours. That's just what we call the luck of the draw. Sometimes they get them a little quicker than others. Maybe they had one previously that let expire. And they call and say, hey, listen, my wife just got hers. It's only been 30 days. Where's mine? I have no idea. You know what happens when I call down to SLED and check on it? They ask me the class date. If it hasn't been at least 90 days, they hang up the phone. They don't even answer. They just hang up. So I don't like getting hung up on. So I tell them, give me at least 100 days. So that's one of the things that we talk about in the class. And I actually ask them as a quiz question, as an open, how many days is it going to take you to get it? I want everybody to answer because ultimately somebody didn't hear it. And it comes back. Number 5 says, when carrying a handgun pursuant to a concealed weapon permit, the permit holder must inform a law enforcement officer that he or she is a permit holder and present a permit identification card when he or she identifies himself as an officer. Number 2, request identification of the permit. Or number 3, request a driver's license. So they often say, do they know that I have a gun when they get pulled over? The answer is no. Currently they do not. Okay, so it's your job to educate the police officer that they have. So one of the things that I do in class is while I'm reading this, they're actually following along with me. I actually pick up a knife and palm it in my hands. And I tell them, when you get pulled over by a police officer, here's what I want you to do. Hands at 10 and 2. But they don't like this. Do you see why? And when I open my hands, the knife hits the table. They want your fingers spread, thumbs touching, so that they can clearly see your hands. And then look at the officer and say, I have a concealed weapon permit. Now, when he says, where is it? Just answer his questions. Things are going to go really well. In fact, I often use my own experiences in this. I've been pulled over allegedly for speeding, okay, 3 different times. One time when the police officer pulled me over, he asked me to take the gun out of the glove box, remove the magazine, lay it on the roof of the car, and from there he took the possession of the gun, treated it as a traffic stop. When it was all over, he gave me the gun unloaded. Second time, I got pulled over on Lawrence Road by a state trooper. He says, I said, I have a gun in the glove box. And he asked me this, are you going to use it? And I started laughing. I said, excuse me? He said, are you going to use it? And I said, no, sir. He said, then I don't care. Give me the documents I requested. Now, my students find that funny, And I believe the officer was looking for my reaction to that ridiculous question. When I laughed and I said, excuse me, it put him at ease. If I had looked straight ahead without giving eye contact and said, no, sir, he'd probably jerk me out of the car. So that was one of the issues there. And then lastly, I got pulled over once going down 85. My sons and I have a shooting range at our house, and we have 200 yards. It's a lot of fun. And we have a car that we keep guns in just in case we want to go shooting at a whim's notice. So when the police officer pulled me over, I told him I have a concealed weapon permit, and I'm an instructor, and there's 65 guns in the trunk and enough ammunition that I could occupy France. And he said, are you serious? I said, I'm dead serious. He said, would you step out of the car, and this is purely for my safety? I said, no problem. He said, do you mind walking around to the back and let me pat you down, and this is purely for my safety? I said, no problem. So he patted me down, and when he did, he found an empty holster on my right hip. And then he asked me, sir, where's your firearm right now? And I shook my head. And he said, did you not hear the question? I said, I heard what you said. He said, could you answer me? I said, it's between the seats. And his head turned, and he said, I thought you said you were an instructor. I said, I am. Then you know that's not a legal place to have it. I said, you're correct. Do you mind if I ask why it's there? Don't mind telling you. I actually have a type of cancer that it disallows me from feeling my legs from my waist down. In fact, I'm not supposed to be driving. This car has a cruise control on it, and at 19.5 miles an hour or faster, it's engaged. So the seat belt actually hits me right where the holster is, and discreetly when I get in the car, I put it between the seats. When I get out, discreetly, I put it back on my hip. I hope you understand. He said, you know, I don't have a problem with that. He said, do you mind if I retrieve your insurance and registration from your glove box? I said, no problem. He took 2 steps, and he looked at me and said, is there a gun in the glove box? I said, I don't know. He said, what do you mean? I said, I didn't put one there, but I can't say one of my kids didn't. So when he retrieved it, he came back and says, do you know why I pulled you over? I said, I have absolutely no idea, but I'm sure you're about to tell me. He said, I clocked you speeding. I said, speeding? How fast do you think I was going? He said, I clocked you going 88 in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. I said, partner, you've been very cordial. For that, I appreciate it. I'm going to do anything to resist you. Write me a ticket. I'll see you in court. It didn't happen. And he said, what makes you so adamant? And I said, well, there's, again, because I have that cancer, the cruise control was on. You might have got me going 63, but you'd not go get me going 80. You shot somebody else. It's quite obvious. I said, write me a ticket. I'll see you in court. It didn't happen. He said, well, what about overrun on the speed, cruise control? And I said, I was a mechanic for 25 years. A car will overrun going down a hill, but not up one. Write me a ticket, I'll see you in court. It didn't happen. He, without looking in the trunk, he handed back all my documents. He said, Mr. Bilicki, you have a great day. This is clearly a case of mistaken identity. And that was the end of it. So I often tell my students, what you put out there is what you're going to get back. If you're argumentative and combative, you're going to get it back in tenfold. If you're cooperative and cordial, you're going to get that back too. It's reciprocated. So remember, these people are somebody's son, daughter, husband or wife, and they just want to go home at the end of their shift too. Have you ever rode with a police officer? And I said, no, you ought to. I have, many times. It's a different world. Yes?
Question. If you don't have a gun with you in the automobile, do you have to say anything about the CWP?
No, currently...
Mark, just repeat the question, please.
Oh, he asked if you don't have a gun in the vehicle, are you still required to announce that you have a CWP permit? And the answer is no, but again, I would actually do it. I encourage my students. In fact, I actually take my CWP and my driver's license in class, and I'll put my CWP on top of my driver's license when the police officer asks for it. Immediately he'll take it out of my hands and say, do you have a gun in the car with you today? I said, no, I don't. Then why'd you give me this? Well, I didn't know if my wife left one in the glove box. But that's not why I'm doing it. Because a convicted felon can own a driver's license, but he can never own a CWP permit. So what I'm actually telling that police officer, I'm a good law-abiding citizen. So your answer is, are you required to do it? The answer is no. But I still do. And I encourage my students to do it as well. In fact, I actually had a radio personality here in Greenville got pulled over. She called me right after it happened. She took her CWP class from me. And she said, listen, I ran a stop sign. And when the guy pulled me over, I gave him my concealed weapon permit. And I told him I didn't have a gun. And for the next 20 minutes, he yelled at me for not having a gun. He let me go on the traffic violation, but he yelled at me for not having my gun. I just thought you should know. I thought it was pretty funny. So it was kind of interesting the way that actually went down. But I think that's probably the norm rather than the exception. So most police officers are cordial and they like concealed carry. They really do. That's not saying that all do. There are probably some out there who are adamantly opposed to it. And for those, you know, it could go any way. So most cases that I've actually heard of have been very pleasant when it comes to law enforcement. All right. By the way, when it says identifies themselves as an officer, I think we need to clarify that, especially in class. So when a police officer comes up to you, he doesn't say, "Hey, my name is Mark Bilicki. I work for Greenwood County. How you doing today?" That's called cordialities. He's not required to do that. Here's a little clue. When he pulls you over in a dark blue car with a yellow stripe, big number on the roof, he's got blue lights, and he gets out of the vehicle. He's wearing a gold badge on and a dark uniform with a gun on his hip. That's his identification. He is a cop. He doesn't have to say he is. It's assumed. Now, if you're dealing with an undercover officer, he's required by law to show you his badge. I need to see your ID. At that point, you're required to give it to him. So the bottom line is they don't have to identify themselves as an officer. That's already done by their uniform. Are we clear? And they go, yeah. Are we clear? And they say yes. Well, let's move on. Number 6 says a concealed weapon permit is justified in using deadly force in self-defense if he or she is not engaged in a criminal activity, he or she is in a place where he or she has the right to be, he or she has a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death, great bodily injury to him or herself or another person. So this is where I start to change my instruction a little bit. I said I'm going to read this one a little different. Watch how I do this. A concealed weapon permit holder, that's you, is justified, it's thumbs up okay, in using deadly force, your gun, in self-defense against an attacker, not the threat of, but somebody who's actually attacking you, if he or she, that's you, is not engaged in the commission of a criminal activity. You cannot go in with your goal to rob a liquor store, the guy pull out a ball bat and you shoot him in self-defense, say, I was defending myself. If you're in the commission of a felony, your ability to use a gun is gone. Got it? Number 2, it says he or she is in a place where he or she has the right to be. You have to be in a place where you legally have the right to be. Now, often after we get done with these laws, we cover what we call carry limitations. And I tell them that we're going to cover those list of places in South Carolina a little bit later on. But they cover it in what we call carry limitations. But one of the biggest ones would be a federal building, like a post office. Now, they're not even required to have a sign. You just have to know that it's off limits. So you can't actually carry in a post office. You couldn't even use a gun in self-defense there. Are we clear? They say yes. Well, let's move on. And then it says, he or she has a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death, great bodily injury to him or herself or another person. This is where the jeopardy clause of that trilogy comes in. They have to have a weapon. They got to be close enough to use it. You actually have to believe in your heart that if you don't stop this, you will die, come very close to it, or somebody around you. And then they start asking, well, who can I defend? You're going to see a law that covers that in just a minute. But they're completely forthcoming in who you can actually defend. But we'll cover that momentarily. Okay? So then we move on to number 7. A citizen may use deadly force against an attacker or an intruder in a person's dwelling, residence, business, or occupied vehicle if necessary to prevent death, great bodily injury, or the commission of a violent crime. And again, I read this one a little different. A citizen, that's you, may use deadly force, your gun, against, in opposition to, an attacker, somebody who's actually attacking you, not the threat of, but somebody who's actually attacking you, or an intruder, somebody who's in your house or your car while you're in it. In a person's, that's you, dwelling, like a hotel room, residence where you live, business where you work, or occupied vehicle, your car, if necessary, which means it can't be avoided, to prevent, which means stop, death, you're going to die, great bodily injury, come really close to it, or the commission, the execution of a violent crime. If you're tooling around the roads in Greenville and you come across a guy trying to clear a jam out of an AK-47 to finish shooting all the kids on a school bus, dude, you're good. You're good. You're going to be a hero. Put your car in reverse, back over him, whatever you got to do to stop that to happen. Now, I tell everybody that's kind of an extreme situation, but in this days, no one can be clear of that. The part that needs a little explanation on this one is occupied vehicle. So let's draw a little scenario here. Let's say you're coming out of Haywood Mall, which is our local mall here in Greenville, As you approach your vehicle, you see the doors open, the dome lights on, a guy's legs hanging out of the door, and he's stealing the stereo out of your car. Well, that's an occupied vehicle, isn't it? They go, yeah. I said, well, maybe not. Let's say that you actually shot and killed this guy, and now you're defending your actions in a court of law. And as a witness or a juror, I'm dying to ask you one question. You know what that is? Why didn't you walk away? The best way to survive a confrontation is to avoid it, which is what we encourage you to do. So here's what I'd do in this scenario. If I saw that going on, I would duck behind the minivan. I'd pull up my cell phone, dial 911, and I'd go into witness mode. There's a guy stealing, a stereo out of my car. He's wearing this kind of clothes. He's got a tattoo. Now, if when you look up, he's coming after you with a screwdriver over his head, well, that's different, isn't it? So when it talks about occupied vehicle, it means a carjacking while you or a family member are in it. So that's basically what they're referring to. Okay? Next, a citizen has no duty to retreat before using deadly force in self-defense if he or she is attacked in a place where he or she has the right to be. So the bottom line is, this one actually is a little more difficult to explain to somebody. And again, this is where we opt to that trilogy, ability, opportunity, and jeopardy. If you're walking in downtown Greenville and somebody comes after you with a knife above their head and says, give me your wallet, ability, opportunity, and jeopardy, have they been met? Do they have a weapon? Are they close enough to use it? Do you feel your life's in jeopardy? Then you're eligible to use your gun. But I would also say that if your mode of egress puts you at equal or less risk, you should explore that option. And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, let's say on downtown Greenville, if you're required to try to get away, or you can get away, but as you get away to run across North Main Street in downtown Greenville, you get hit by a truck and killed. Didn't that put you at worse risk? Yeah. So in that opportunity, you might want to use your gun. If your only mode of egress is down a dark alley where you suspect 2 or 3 of his friends came from, is that a better or worse risk? That's worse. Then use your gun. If you can avoid that confrontation, you should try to do that. But again, if equal or worse risk is evident, then I would use my gun. If equal or less risk is met, then I would explore that option before I actually pull the gun. Okay? So that's one of the things that we talk about there. There is no duty to retreat in one's place of business, even if the aggressor also has the right to be there. Your business has the ability to allow you to have a gun in their premises. Now, this is one of the things that we talk about. Currently, there is no state or federal law that would deny you from carrying a gun into a bank. Did you know that? The choice of carrying a gun into a bank is just like any other business. They are no different than Walmart or Kmart or Sears at that point. If they don't want to deny you from carrying a gun into that establishment, then they would have to have the proper sign on the door. So the bottom line is, we're going to cover what a proper sign is a little later on when we cover that carry limitations. I think it's the climax to the class, and we'll deal with that a little later on. So if your employer gives you written permission to have a gun, then you can do that. Without it, you can't assume that you do. For instance, I fielded a call several years ago of a gentleman who took my class that was working in a bar downtown Greenville. He was fired by his employer for walking the ladies after hours to their vehicle because he had a gun. And I said, well, we have other issues, because back then you couldn't even have one in an establishment that serves alcohol. So a lot of times students will hear what they want to hear in class, but not what I actually say. And that can be a difficult thing to do. In fact, I'll tell you how I train CWP instructors to combat against that scenario. In fact, I'll do it right now. When I train new instructors, I often tell them that when I get to my CWP class, I draw a very primitive chart of the seating arrangements. And during the class, I'll go around the class, sometime during the class, and I'll ask your first name, last initial. And I put it on that seat location. Okay? Underneath your name and initial, or where your first name and last initial goes, I actually put the gun that you used in the class to qualify with. And later on, after the class is concluded, I actually put your written test score as well as your shooting score. And that gets filed with your written test paper. In the event that somebody gets charged with a crime, let's say that they took a gun on the school property, and their lawyer calls me and says, hey, my client says that you didn't talk about this in class. Well, I have a seating arrangement, and the guy sitting to his left got the answer right, the guy sitting to his right, and the one across from him. It must have been his issue. So I keep that on every class. Now, does it take a little extra time to do it? Sure does. Never had to use it. That's not saying that I won't today or tomorrow or next week or next month. So I train instructors to be diligent about what they actually do. It also, I think, tells them or sends a message to the new instructors that they have to be very thorough on the legal part of it to make sure that they actually cover everything that's required. All right, number 10. You as a citizen have no right to resist a lawful arrest. I usually look at a student and say, what's a lawful arrest? Anytime they want to arrest you. There's nothing that you can do or say at that moment that's going to stop what's about to be affected upon you. Now, what do you think is going to happen if you resist? With a gun. I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to see your picture on Channel 4 News at 6 o'clock. I'm going to go, that's one of my students. Don't do that. I don't like it. So the bottom line is, there's a way to argue with a police officer. Tell him, I know this is being filmed. I don't agree with what you're doing. I just want you to admit it on camera. Let's go see your boss. We'll talk about it there. And go. Your kid's dance recital, you're going to miss it. You know, it's one of those things that you're going to have to sacrifice to make sure that you did it right. By the way, one of the things that we actually tell the students as well is that when they're involved in a shooting, if and when they are, and by the way, just so you know, in 20,000 students, I know of at least 6, there could be others, but at least 6 students who have used a gun in self-defense. All 6 times they result in the death of the perpetrator, and all 6 times there have been no charges filed. As an instructor, I'm batting 1,000. That's a pretty good average. Now, there could be others that have used it that I don't know about, but I've actually got to interview all of those students after the shootings in some capacity or another. And it's pretty enlightening to see what actually happens. But one of the things that we advise the people to do is when you're involved in a shooting, you're required to answer what we call custodial questions. Who are you? Is this your residence? Yes. And then at that point, when the police officer says, what happened here? Tell them, I'm sure you can understand I'm under a great deal of stress. With that in mind, I'll give you a full and accurate statement in 48 hours after I've talked to my attorney. And then shut your mouth. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do. Your neighbor's going to be rapping on the police door window saying, hey, what happened? You can't say anything. What you do say can be used against you in a court of law. So the best way to start off with your attorney is not to say anything. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen there. He's going to pull you in a room. He's going to, kick the police officer out. Tell me what happened. And then he's going to listen to you on every aspect. He's probably going to make some notes. And then he's going to come back and say, listen, when that police officer comes back in here, or that detective, we want to speak in the light that's most favorable to our position. What? Did you just tell me to lie? No, I didn't say that. If you had a glass that was half full, an accurate statement could be it's half full. Another statement could be it's half empty. 2 have different meanings, but they're both true. So whenever we speak to this person, we want to speak to the light that's most favorable to our position. And that's where your attorney starts to earn his money. Because the fact that you haven't said anything up to this point that may incriminate you, he's going to tell you how to say what you're going to say to the police officer that speaks in the light that's most favorable to your position. Am I clear on that one? And they go, yeah. And they go, this is complicated. No, it's not. You just got to be diligent about doing it. And it's going to be a very difficult thing to do because the first thing you're going to want to do is defend your actions to whoever will listen. But you can't do it. You got to bite your tongue. You got to bite your tongue. You know, I often tell them there's probably a way to get yourself out of that environment too. My chest hurts, you know. They might take you to the emergency room and lock up, but at least you're not in that location. You know, I've actually seen people cuffed to hand gurneys in the hospital, which I'm assuming that maybe they took some of my advice. I don't know. For me, it might be true. I don't know. Number 11. A citizen is not without fault and the plea of self-defense is unavailable if he or she voluntarily participates in mutual combat or dueling. Well, the one that gets a lot of laughs is dueling. They think that's hysterical. Do we really have a problem with dueling in South Carolina? And I tell them, yeah, but there's a form of dueling that may be a little more obscure that you might be partaking in that you're not really sure. So let me read this one a little different way. A citizen is not without fault, which means you're 100% at fault. In your plea, your excuse of self-defense, hey, I was defending myself, is unavailable, which means you can't use it. If he or she, that's you, voluntarily by will participates, engages in mutual combat, fighting. So if I reach up and just sucker punch you, what's your first reaction? You're going to hit me. That's now mutual combat. Your ability to use a gun is gone. Unless there comes a thing called escalation. And we talk about that in class. So we talk about the escalation of force and when it becomes justified to use deadly force. And then we deal with the thing that says, or dueling. And do we really have a problem with people at the dawn defending their sister's honor? Probably not. But let's say this. If you're in the mall and somebody's walking behind you making a rude comment about your wife or your daughters, and you turn around and say, buddy, let's take this outside, that's a duel. You just challenge them to a duel. So if you call somebody out or go as being responded to being called out, your ability to use a gun is gone. And they go, wow, I've done that before. I said, well, this is where it becomes an issue. So that's what we refer to as dueling. This is a good one. I enjoy this one because this is one of the ones where I use a really good analogy. Deadly force shall only be used to protect your life or the life of another person. Deadly force should only be used as a last resort in defense of life, great bodily injury, when all other means have failed. Now, up until now, they've learned that there's no duty to retreat in your house, your car, your business, and your work, and all that other things. But now you should. This contradicts everything that they might have learned thus far. So I have a very unique way of explaining this. I say, let's say that we have an outbuilding here. And there's a bunch of stuff in this building. And my wife wants to wash and paint the floors. So she hires my son Bradley and two of his friends on Saturday morning to move everything out of the building. She comes down at 10 o'clock in the morning and said, Bradley, this place looks great. Hey, Bradley, there's one more box over there in that corner. Get that thing out of here. Let's get this done. So Bradley bends over, picks it up, and there it is. A 6-foot copperhead snake. That snake has been in this building the entire time. It doesn't want to deal with Bradley or either of his friends. All it wants to do is be left alone. Remember, the best way to survive a confrontation is to avoid it, which is what that snake has been doing. Now, the way I see it, Bradley has two options. He can walk over to the overhead door and push a button, and that overhead door will begin to open. When it does, that warm sunlight will begin to peer through that door. That snake, with his limited vision, will feel the warmth of that light. And if you leave him alone for 2 minutes, where's he going? Out the door. So the best way to survive a confrontation is to avoid it. But that's not what my son Bradley does. Bradley does option 2. He grabs a 6-foot 2x4 from the corner of the room and he starts banging like he was turning butter. Now, if Bradley does option 2, what do you think the snake's reaction would be? The snake will strike. Well, here's what they're trying to tell you. If with your limited vision you can see daylight, you should take it. It's only when you're backed in a corner can you strike. We got it? And they go, wow, that's pretty amazing. So if we can get away safely, we should explore that option. But again, if it puts at equal or worse risk, we should probably stand our ground and defend ourselves. Okay? So that's how we use it to explain that. And a lot of times there are some follow-up questions, but what we try to do is give them the intent of the law, not the actual law. There are people that are sticklers on that, and we can recite that. All that's indicated in the book as well. Here's the one. The defense of other rule applies to any relative, friend, or bystander. A relative is somebody you're related to. A friend is an acquaintance, and a bystander is everybody else. So why didn't they just write everybody? Well, one of my instructors says he thinks the lawmakers get paid by the letter. If they stretch it out, they get a little more money. I don't think that's true, but there it is. So that's the kind of things. Here's the one. Let's talk briefly. I'm going to break away from this. Let's talk about a couple of things that have changed recently in the law. One was you couldn't carry an establishment license for on the premise consumption of alcohol. So you couldn't go into a building that served alcohol for consumption. Well, Nikki Haley signed a law that says you can now do that, with 3 exceptions. Number 1, if the business is legally posted, and again, it's got to have that legal sign, it's off limits. Number 2, if you're consuming alcohol in any way, shape, or form, your ability to carry a gun into that establishment has been limited as well, so you can't do it there. And number 3, if an employee asks you to leave, you have to go. You have to go. You can't stand up and scream, it's my right. You got to go. So those are the limitations that will keep you from having a gun in a place where they serve alcohol for consumption. Okay, so those are some of the things that changed. Let's talk about another one. Previously, without a concealed weapon permit, you could have a gun in your car. Okay, it had to be in the glove box, console, or trunk. Now, it didn't have to be locked or lockable, just closed. Okay, now often people would say, can it be loaded? Listen, if you want to take your SIG 226 chamber around, remove the magazine, squeeze another one in there, seat the magazine, cock the hammer, remove the safety, and place it in the glove box so the muzzle's pointing at you while you're driving, you can do it. I think you're crazy, but you could do it. There's no law that says a gun has to be unloaded. So let's talk about this. Glove box, console, or trunk. Okay? Your argument is, can I put it in that pouch in my door? Watch this. Glove box, console, or trunk. Did you hear me say there was a little pouch in the door? No. Well, can I put it in that little pouch behind the seat? Watch this. Glove box, console, or trunk. Those are your only options. Now, with the concealed carry permit, it can be anywhere on your person as long as it's out of sight, okay, in the normal wearing of clothing. So with the concealed weapon permit, we're held to a different level. Now, what Nikki Haley did is she changed the law. It says now it can be anywhere in your vehicle as long as it's not in plain sight and secure. And SLED would say the emphasis is on secure. If you put your gun under your seat and you hit the brakes and it comes out in the floorboard, that's not secure. So it has to be out of sight and secure. Without a CWP, it's glove box, console, or trunk only. Now, the argument is, well, I don't have a trunk. Yes, you do, and we've defined it by law. The trunk is the area behind the rearwardmost seat, but not under the seat. In addition, it's the area where luggage is normally carried. So if you have a Suburban with a front, middle, and back, it's behind that back seat, but not under the seat. It's where you'd put your luggage. You got a cargo van with 2 seats in it. It's behind those seats, but not under the seat. It's where you put your luggage. You got an extended cab pickup truck that has that shelf that folds down. Can you get behind that shelf? No. So your rearwardmost seat would be your front seat, but not under the seat. It's where you'd put your luggage. Glove box, console, or trunk. Those are your options. So until you get your concealed carry permit, that's where it goes. Cool? They go good. Guys, I think I'm out of time. That went quick, didn't it? Any questions?
There is one exception to that, though. She says, and I've already wondered about this.
Okay.
Transporting a weapon, except when going to your normal place of hunting and fishing. It doesn't say hunting and fishing. It says your normal.
Yeah, that's.
I got a hunt club that morning, and I see these records all the time. And lay in the back seat of my truck.
That's a
Can you repeat the question?
the question was, it's a little unclear because when I'm traveling to or from or engage the act of hunting or fishing, I can have a gun. Now, that's actually a hunter's ed law. It's not a CWP law, and because I teach that, I can talk about that too. So here it is.
I think the statute actually says to your normal place.
Yeah.
Hunting or fishing, your normal place.
I think you're right. I think it does say normal.
So if I'm not going to my shooting range or my hunting club, I just put my gun in the back seat because that's my normal place of hunting and fishing.
Yeah. Well, concealed carry is allowed even when you're hunting, okay? Open carry is allowed when you're traveling to or from or engage the act of hunting or fishing with a valid hunting or fishing license. So you can't not have a hunting license or a fishing license, say you're going fishing, and not be justified there. Now, one of the things that we field on this argument is this. Well, I know what you're thinking. All you got to do is go down to Walmart, buy a fishing license, throw a fishing pole in the back of your truck, and you can go anywhere you want with an open carry. And I tell them that's not exactly true, so here's why. Let's say that you leave your house with the fishing pole in your trunk and you go to Walmart. You didn't go fishing. You went to Walmart. When you leave Walmart, you stop at a convenience store to grab a soda. You didn't go fishing. You went to a convenience store. So it means where you park your vehicle to where you hunt or fish. Got it? And they go, oh, so that's it. So the open carry thing. By the way, the open carry is on the table this year in legislation. And I often tell my students, I have 2 schools of thought on open carry. Number 1, it's the Second Amendment right. They never should have took it away. And because of that, I'm fighting tirelessly for you to get it back. With that said, I would never do it. And I challenge the sanity of a person that actually would. And they go, why? And so, well, a lot of people are under the assumption that when they put a gun openly on their hip, they're sending an aura around them that they can go anywhere they want, and if you mess with me, I'll end your life. And that's usually where their thinking stops. Here's what I say. Let's say that you're in a convenience store deciding what soda to get. When there's a convicted felon in there, sees the gun on your hip, and from behind you, he pushes your face in the glass, grabs the gun from behind you. There's now a gun in this fight, and you're the one who brought it. You didn't like that one? How about this one? You're in a convenience store trying to decide what soda to get. When you hear a commotion, you look over your right shoulder. See the clerk with a shotgun thrust into his face. As your eyes meet, that guy that's holding the shotgun scans the room, sees a gun on your hip. Who's he shooting first? If you have a gun openly, you will be a part of this equation, whether you want to or not. If it's concealed, you can make a choice of if or when to get involved, if at all. You may not need to, but if it's exposed, you're going to be part of this equation. And it may not have the outcome that you like. And so I tell people, even though I want you to have the right back, I don't think you should exercise it in most normal cases. Well, they go, well, why do we fight so hard to get it back? Remember, the ability to have a gun into a bank is neither a local, state, or federal law. Let's say that you're standing in the bank line and you're next up. as you grab your jacket to grab your checkbook, your gun goes from concealed to open. It would protect you there. So I kind of like that law for that. Other than that, the only other reason to carry a gun openly is a thing that I call vanity. See my new Kimmer, isn't it cool? I mean, that's the only reason to do it as far as I'm concerned. So the open carry thing is something that I'm passionate about. The fact that we should have it back, but I'm also passionate that I don't think I would never exercise it, and I'm encouraging my students not to do it as well either. Now, I know there are certain ones that do. Now, with that said, my wife and I own a bunch of property. In fact, we have a private shooting range on our house. When I'm mowing the grass, I'm wearing a gun open. Okay, but we have a lot of critters out there that I don't like. So just took out a rabid fox the other day. So and it turns out that I think it had rabies. So it was probably a good harvest there. So, any other questions? Good, better? Huh? I am on my property. Yeah. Yeah, and I go fishing, by the way. Well, I live on Saluda River, so I go fishing all the time, too. Although it's rare that I carry a gun to go fishing. Yes?
What about a boat?
A boat engaged in the act of hunting or fishing with a valid hunter fishing license.
It's international waters, but I guess the waters contained within the state.
The waters contained within the state, I believe, were sound. The international waters, I'm not sure I know that law. So I couldn't speak intelligently about it. It's a good one to research.
You're on like Sandy Cooper or something like that.
You're good. As long as you have a hunting or fishing license, you're good to have a concealed carry permit. Yeah? Yeah? Yes?
You mentioned that there's a pretty good variety in terms of capabilities of those that will be teaching.
Yeah.
Any suggestions about how you would sort to try to find?
Yeah, that...
I don't think that people that license would talk anybody down. I would assume that they would maybe let you know something.
The question is, how do you find a good instructor? And that's a very frustrating question. Here's why. One of the guys that I teach with on a regular basis witnessed a bad instructor. And he interviewed the students as they exited the room. And they thought this guy walked on water. And my buddy says, why do they think this guy is good? And I said, the reason is they don't have a baseline. They are not required to take the class again unless it expires by a certain number of days, and then they're required to take it again. Then their second go around, they may realize that the first guy was bad. So the answer is, when you talk to somebody who had a CWP, they're probably going to say my instructor was fantastic, which may not always be accurate. I don't know. I don't know how you can actually find someone unless you talk to a great number of people. I got to tell you that outside of having a website, I don't advertise at all. I never do. And in fact, I have a class tomorrow that's full, and my one next weekend is full too. And I actually have a registration card that I use in class. And one of the questions I ask on that registration card is, how did you hear about this class? Did you see me at a gun show? Did you see me on the internet? Did you find my name on the wall in the bathroom at Walmart? I mean, just trying to figure out what works. And I got to tell you, 95% of them said a friend of mine took your class. 95% of them. So I really don't need to advertise. It's the word of mouth that goes out there. When I train new instructors, I tell them this. When a student comes out and they like your class, they'll tell 2 friends. If they didn't like it, they'll tell 10. And that's kind of the way it works. So in most cases, you may find out that that's an issue there as far as seeking it. But again, I don't know if there's a legitimate way to do that. SLED is actually not allowed to promote one instructor over another. One of the things you may want to do is look at their credentials. You know, their credentials. In fact, a lot of people, when they look at my business card, they go, holy, I said, it's not all on there either. I mean, it's what I do. And that doesn't really mean anything, because I'll tell you what made me seek my credentials. I was actually going through a court case years ago where I was being sued by Anderson County because I was running an illegal gun range on my property. It was a precedent-setting case in South Carolina. In fact, the Gun Range Protection Act, you're looking at the first guy that ever used it in court. So that's it. So the issue is this. When I was going through that course, which took about 2 years to fully conclude, I actually woke up at about 1 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat and woke my wife up, and I said, we're going to lose this case and we're going to lose big. She said, what are you talking about? And I said, listen, I just had a dream where I was sitting on a court case, and the judge looked at me and said, well, Mr. Bilicki, what makes you qualified to run a gun range? And my answer back then was, well, I really like guns. That was it. And I realized that the only difference between an instructor and me was he had a piece of paper saying he was. And that set out my quest to become certified. When I started becoming certified, I thought, you know, this is a lot of fun. I wonder how far I could go with this. And currently, the NRA is no longer you know, certifying people as seniors or masters. So the credentials that I have will expire. Now, they may open it again in several years. When they get a certain number of people, they cut it off. And when they expire, retire, or die, they open it back up and fill it back up a little bit. So I'm in a unique situation. In fact, as a master training counselor, I believe I'm the only one in the state of South Carolina. So, and I may be the only one in Georgia, Florida, and possibly North Carolina that are active. So that's pretty cool. So I tell everybody, with my credentials and $2, you too can go to McDonald's and buy a cup of coffee. It means absolutely nothing. Yeah.
I'm presently not a gun owner.
Okay.
I wanted to take the CWP class. Do I have to own one, or do I be at a facility where they have one to use?
Well, okay, he's wanting to know, he's not a gun owner, wants to get a CWP and doesn't own a gun. Is he required to have a gun to take the class? Again, different instructors do different things. I can tell you what I do in my class. Our class is set at a price. It's $130. Here's what that includes. We supply the paper. We assist you in filling it out line by line. That's an attempt to minimize errors. We'll do your fingerprints right there in class. We do the notarization of all the paperwork. We pay the $50 seat fee and we mail it. It also includes a loaner gun, eye and ear protection if you need them. Now, I often tell people when they come to me and say, I don't own a gun, I'm not ready for this class. I tell them, don't buy a gun before you come to this class. And they go, why? I said, we're going to cover some criteria that may influence your decision. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people go, I wish I'd come to this class before I bought this gun, because I never would have bought the gun I have. I agree with that. So we're going to cover some criteria that may influence your decision in my class. I don't know if another would do the same. So let me do this. I think I'm wrapping up my time here, going a little.
I have one question, Mark.
Sure.
I believe you testified in a case or two,
yeah.
And we talked about recently. And are you aware of any expert witnesses in the state or anything about shooting, like about how far it is reasonable to shoot an intruder or an attacker?
Okay, the NRA actually deals with this in a course that they have called Personal Protection Inside the Home. Okay, it's the next step that someone would take when they become a pistols. Once they take a basic pistol and they go, I really enjoyed that class, what's next? Well, Personal Protection Inside the Home is a class that we would teach through the NRA. And in that class, they have a thing they call a Tooler drill. Are you familiar with this? A Tooler drill defines the distance that you can use a gun against an attacker. So here's the way the drill goes down. There are 3 people needed to execute this drill. Number 1 is a shooter. Somebody has a gun on their hip as they would concealed. So if you have a round in the chamber, that's fine. If you want to load a round when you pull the gun, however you would normally have it. It's got to be concealed just like you were in a concealed weapon. So your job is to stand there, hands at surrender, thumbs above the ears, and just wait. Now, to your left, usually to your weak side, for me that'd be my left, is another person without a gun, and they're standing shoulder to shoulder with you. Off to the distance is what we call the observer. The observer will give a command, go. When the go command is given, the shooter will actually draw and fire his gun as accurately as he can in 2 shots. As soon as that go command is given, the person to their weak side will run as fast as they can in the opposite direction. When the second shot is heard, they mark the line on the ground. And that is the distance that they say is the average. That comes out between 25 and 30 feet. So we talk about when a person is defending themselves against a weapon, most weapons are what we call contact weapons. If I had a knife, I have to make contact with you to use that. If I have a ball bat or a hammer, I have to make contact. Almost everything that you can think of is a contact weapon. So when you shoot somebody with a contact weapon inside a 30-foot circle, the law said you did really good. 30 to 40 feet, you might want to have a really good story. And outside 40 feet, we might have issues. Okay? Now, obviously, that would change if they're using a gun against you, because that's not a contact weapon. So we talk about that in class as well. And the tooler drill, defined by the NRA, is what covers that in that class. Now, we don't normally do that in a CWP class. We simply address it. We don't actually exercise it. When I train new instructors, they're required to exercise the tooler drill in class. So they get to experience it. And a lot of people use it in their CWP classes just to show students. For me, I'm limited on my ability for mobile. For me, when I did it, I got 16 feet. My daughter-in-law, she got 43 feet. So now the average is what we're looking at. So if we do that over the course of the average of the class and we add that number up, it's going to come somewhere around 30 feet. So good question. All right, let me give you some information. Again, my name is Mark Bilicki, M-A-R-K-B-I-L-I-C-K-I. Is my phone number in your books? Let me give it to you. It's area code 864-907-2852. And my email address is my name, Mark Bilicki, at Aero, A-E-R-O, Tech, T-E-C-H, the words firearms with an S.com. If you have any questions, you want to take a class, know somebody that does, give me a holler. I got one tomorrow. I'll be doing a class tomorrow, and I think next week I'm back down at, I'm going to Orlando tomorrow, or Saturday after the class. I'm heading down to Orlando. I got a class down there with, I believe, my Secret Service. I think I'm doing something down in Orlando with Secret Service next week, so we'll see what goes on. By the way, I just did an instructor level class not too long ago, had an active CWP on presidential detail fail the shooting portion. Go figure. It's really difficult. You know, when they realize they're under a lot of stress when they're in class, and he actually failed the shooting portion. Secret Service, I was floored. So it was kind of funny. He said he wasn't using his duty firearm. He brought his duty firearm, and he passed the class then, but it's kind of neat. But so if anybody has any other questions, I'll be around for a few minutes if you got something. All right, cool. Appreciate the time. Yeah, thank you.